Yeah, I think we're on. Yeah, it'll be a couple of minutes before we start, but yeah.
So can they hear you, sorry, or not?
I think let's just put it in the chat. I feel like a streamer.
An influencer.
Like Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, there we go. We can bring back fantails then.
Yeah.
We can bring back chocolate covered.
Yeah, we don't have any chocolate. I feel a bit, especially at this time of night. Yeah.
Oh,
Let's see if the
chocolate.
microphone is on.
Yeah.
I think it's on. Oops. Yep, I think this sounds okay. Chantel's just confirmed that.
Wonderful.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. As we were looking to try and put together a time to sort of inform you all about what's going on, we sort of weren't sure exactly what time of day to have it or where it might sit, but now is the chosen time to have it. We hope that it suits you. Please feel free to send this webinar off to your friends after we've recorded it. Thank you so much for joining us, first of all. I'm Peter Vines, Managing Director of Ray White Commercial, and our friends this evening will be running you through the LMR, which is on the lips of everybody. I think at the moment, it's a very layered planning system that we're seeing in New South Wales at the moment, and so there's kind of a lot of information to wade through, and so we really just wanted to get in front of you and I guess try and offer some education and some guidance as best we can around the new policies that have been brought in, but also and for some more importantly, how to kind of understand what the upside of that might be to your property, but also in terms of how to maximise value,
Yep.
which is at the end of the day what we're all about.
Yep.
And so I'd just like to introduce you first of all to Floss Rutter from Garden Homes, and DA Angels, town planner, member of the Housing Industry Association. Has been involved with the North Shore for a very long time, understands the ins and outs. So we'll be hearing from Floss shortly, and then also joined by Danny and Tao Shi, not brothers, but might as well be. They're sort of kind of joined at the hip. Previously with a large agency focusing on the North Shore market. Have sold sort of, over $700 million worth of development sites down in the lower North Shore, and have worked on they've helped something like 400 owners of strata and houses amalgamate and come together and do deals. So there's certainly the right people for you to be listening to. I think probably that's about all I have to say, but thank you very much again for joining us, and we hope you get a lot of value out of tonight. We will have a time for questions at the end. If you don't feel comfortable asking your question in this public forum, our contact details will be available so that you're more than welcome to reach out to us and have any further discussions that you'd like to afterwards. But I guess without further ado,
Yeah, let's go. Let's go. Let's start with, I suppose, the more important part, which is the planning side of this thing. And, Floss being the absolute specialist in this area, could you take us through the couple of questions that are on everyone's mind?
Sure. So first question that everyone asks me is, what is an LMR? LMR means low mid-rise housing, right? Low and mid-rise residential. So basically it means that you are going to be densifying the inner areas around specific town centres and areas that have been well chosen by the state government. This can include a shopping centre, or it can include a train station. It can include a myriad of things. And so, yeah, it's 171 nominated stations, as you can see, as you can read on the list there. The thing about the LMRs, which is interesting, is that it is meant to be a certain distance, walking distance away from the town centre or the well-located area. So that's 800 metres, within 800 metres of the walking distance, and that's actually physically walking, not as the crow flies, unfortunately. A lot of people said to me, oh, but, you know, I've drawn a line from the edge of it to 800 metres and I'm within it. Not quite. You have to literally put it from there, walk it down, walk it around, and make sure that you can walk to that station or to your house.
Yeah. We might have a few drop-offs after that. Just realised that they're not quite.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, no. So on that.
Wait.
There is some good news. There are sites that you can go on to see if you are in the LMR. They're only indicative though. So even if you don't have what we call the golden ticket, where your house is shaded yellow or golden, then you can actually still be within the LMR. So you can still be within walking distance. And one of the best things to do is actually go and get a survey done to make sure that you are within that 800 metres. And it's to the corner of your property. So it doesn't actually have to be to the other end of your property, just to the corner of your property.
So the other way to say is, even if you only got 1 square metre of your land within 800 metres or walking distance from the town centre, that's enough. The whole block is.
We hope.
Yeah.
Well, this is the next thing. We hope. So town planning is very, how do we say, it has
fluid.
Fluid. Thank you. That's a very good way of saying it. Very fluid, because it's not black and white. So it's always open to interpretation. So we have asked several times of the state government whether or not it is a corner, if it is a millimetre, if it is a whole block, and all that sort of thing. And different town planners and different lawyers will have a different view of where the interpretation of the law starts and ends. So we do have to kind of talk to, this is why I say it's always good to get a surveyor to absolutely concrete evidence to say how much you're doing that, how much far away you are, all of that sort of thing, because it gives you a basis to go to a council and say, yep, I am 799.9 metres away. So, yeah. Okay, so all right then, I'm being wrapped up by my mother.
So I think, to help everyone understand how they can, I suppose, find out a little bit more about their own property, and to answer the questions, is my home a development site? And there are a couple of websites that the owners or the property owners on the North Shore can actually use to find out about that. And do you want to just quickly go through them and tell us what they actually do and what the information is about?
100%. The good news is that they're all free. They're all free databases, and they're all state government databases. So that, I know that sounds funny, but our state government is actually quite good in terms of information. Most people sit there going, no, they're not. Actually, compared to some places, they are. They're great. So the first one we look at is what's called Planning Portal, or Spatial Viewer, or eSpatial, some people know it as. And it will give you a whole host of information, very basic information. So it will run through what zoning you are, whether you're R1, R2, R3, R4, Bs, Cs, all of that sort of area. It also, on part of it, will give you your council, where your council area is. So whether or not you're Ku-ring-gai, North Sydney, Mossman, Lane Cove, wherever, Willoughby, thank you, Willoughby, whichever council area you're in, it will give you that. It will also give you things like whether or not you're bushfire prone.
Heritage.
big one.
Yep.
And whether or not you're in a heritage conservation area, which is
Very
even
big.
very big,
Yeah.
right, and very complex. It also gives you flooding to a certain degree. You do have to go back to your local council to find out if you are in a flood zone or if you're flood affected, but you've got the basic information to say, I may be flood affected. So with the eSpatial Viewer, you also get your very basic information of council information, whether it be your height, your minimum lot size, and your, this is just basic stuff, minimum lot size, floor space ratio, if they have a floor space ratio on it. And whether that's okay.
Sorry,
That's
just
all
a
right.
technical issue. I'm not sure what's happening here.
That's okay.
It's not.
Whilst I was doing that, and more importantly, whether or not you're a TOD site, right? So you
Yep.
can actually drop down on one of the lists and it will tell you whether or not you're a TOD, a TOD site.
And the TOD site is?
And a TOD site is a transport orientated development site, which at the moment Ku-ring-gai don't have, only because Ku-ring-gai Council has said that they want a little bit of extra time from the state government to sort out their planning regulations, right? We won't go there. So eSpatial Viewer gives you all of that information for free, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And as I said, it actually also shows you if you're bushfire affected and what type of bushfire, whether you're buffer zone, category 1 or flame zone.
Yeah.
So great information to
So
have.
that basically give you a general zoning overview, a planning, your planning control of your property.
Yeah.
Once you put addressing,
Exactly.
there's number of layer you can add on to check density heights based on the existing control.
Exactly.
And then there's another website which is specifically designed, published for LMR.
Absolutely.
Basically,
Yes.
once you open that website, put your address, and it will tell you whether you in the indicative zone or not.
Exactly. It's the one that I was talking about, whether or not you're a golden ticket.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we all remember our Roald Dahls, right? Going back to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
And the golden ticket, you win the golden ticket.
Yeah.
So the LMR will show you a patch of purple, which is your town centre or your well-located area. And then from there, it will do a very basic kind of outline of your golden area. But remember, even if you think your property is golden, you may not be within 800 meters. And subsequently, even if you're white, which is what you're outside the golden zone, you still might be an LMR.
Yeah. So basically, it's already
very indicative. Absolutely.
We want to.
We might because I'm getting some technical message saying that it's probably not set up correctly, but
that's okay.
We want to actually demonstrate, do a live demonstration for owners on the shore to find out about their property. And this is one property that we've been asked by a client of ours. The house itself is in St. Ives, 14 Bimbara Avenue. We're just going to do a live demonstration
just to show they can actually check,
do that themselves.
So
what I might do is just show everyone how to go to this website and let's go to this one here. So the first thing you do is
go to
there you go. So that's Spatial Planner, Spatial Viewer, eSpatial, it's also known as. So you type in your address, as Tam's doing now. And there you go. So as you can see that it's R2 zoning, right? Which means that it's residential 2, which is low density residential. And so if you drop down, as you can see on the screen.
Yep.
If you drop down on the, have you got it?
Yep.
Yep, perfect. If you drop down on the left hand,
Yep.
on the right hand side,
Yep.
sorry, right hand side, and you click on any of those, it will show you what you are. So that's, for example, that's your council area is local, is Coringa.
The current
Your
FSR.
current FSR under the council regulations. Your acid sulfate soil, no one really worries about that, so don't worry about that one.
Yep.
And then your lot size map, which should be a minimum lot size is 930. Yeah,
At the moment.
at the moment. And then the land zoning, again,
It's
it gives you
R2.
R2.
Yep.
And if you actually click on all of those, it will bring up information. And if you click on that, that will take you to the state government website, which is your legislation.
So the actual
The actual legislation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, which is pretty cool, I think.
Yep.
Right. And then, you know, you can kind of check things out and
Bit of light reading.
bit of light
Yeah,
reading.
yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
in
right.
show, as long as you on this website, you can quickly check your
Exactly.
FSR, height of building,
Yep.
minimum lot size,
Yep.
what's your zoning. So that's pretty much
Yeah.
on the landowner. Look at it. Probably more importantly to check the heritage or conservation area
Absolutely.
on this.
So on the heritage conservation, if we go over to the left-hand side now.
Yep.
And we drop down into, yep, there you go, planning layers. So drop into heritage.
Yep.
And you click on the state heritage curtilage, right? It hasn't
Nothing
brought
pops
anything
up,
up. So on the next, on the heritage map,
Yep.
again, nothing popped up. So it's not in a conservation area or on a state heritage listing or a local listing.
Yep.
So that's great.
Yep.
So the next one we're going to look at is bushfire. So if we move upwards, bushfire is under hazard.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's down.
Hazard.
Lot
Yep.
Contribution. There we go.
There you are, hazard. There we go. So bushfire.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if we were to zoom out a wee bit, are we okay to do that?
Testing us.
Testing is sorry.
There
Keep
we go.
going. Keep going.
Yep.
All right. As you can see, there's no bushfire here, but if we were to move to there, okay. First of all, see that brown spot
There's
there?
the bushfire.
There's your bushfire over
Yep.
there. So all of that area, so that yellow is buffer zone, then the red is category 1, and then the orange is going to be your flame zone. Yeah.
So, and we also can use this one here, which is the LMR viewer,
That's right.
which is what, we mentioned earlier, one of the very useful websites.
Yeah.
We would do something very similar, I suppose, just typing in the address
Just
here.
type in the address,
Yep.
absolutely, and it should bring it up. And there you go, that's a golden ticket. So again, if you zoom out a little bit, then you can see that there are areas which are white,
Yeah.
but those areas are most likely within the 800. They've just kind of put a splotch.
Just a
Yes, of course.
quick question. So if we're in an area with hazards
Mhm.
or heritage conservation, does that mean that we're out and we can't do anything? More investigations presumably required, but it doesn't mean that it's
No.
completely off the table.
No, it doesn't mean
Okay.
it's completely off the table. So, for example, in the conservation areas, the heritage conservation areas, you can still do an LMR development,
Yes.
right? However, if you are heritage listed under the council rules and under state government rules, you can't unfortunately do a development on your site. It is very, very difficult,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay.
Like with any development and anything like that, it's
Yeah.
very difficult
Yes.
to do anything on heritage.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
In terms of the bushfires are an interesting
Yeah.
issue
Yes.
because it depends on your category. So
Yeah.
if you are the highest category, which is flame zone, then very unlikely you're going to be able to do anything.
Yeah.
If you are a buffer zone, however, there is an opportunity to do it because you don't need as high a stringent fire provisions as you would for a category.
Getting
1.
people out in the
Getting
event
out,
of it,
yeah.
and the
Or a
number
burning.
of people or
Yeah.
burning, whatever.
or just a house burning.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah. Thank you very much.
no worries.
So from that website, you can
Yeah.
see this is one of the town center.
Mhm.
It's called the Live Shopping Center.
Yep.
So that's in New South Wales. The state government have identified 171,
Yes.
as you mentioned before.
Mhm.
They either be a train station or major shopping center or
Yeah.
you know, or shopping center or transportation center.
Yeah.
So obviously, when you type in your address into that website, they give you indicative of the yellow
Exactly.
area, which is if you within the area, then we can
Yeah.
talk further.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Now, I will just say quickly that no one really knows any rhyme or reason why these particular 171 stations and shopping centres were selected. There was originally talk of every shopping centre and every train station and possibly some bus stops being an LMR, but they were pulled back into the 170 well-chosen locations. But again, no rhyme or reason. And we also have no rhyme or reason as to why it's 800-metre walking distance, but that's what we...
And hence why you see the
Hence
shape
why
of
I've got the shape of
the red zone. But I think the
Exactly.
yellow zone is like it's a circle.
Exactly.
Because of its walking distance and legal
Exactly.
pedestrian paths to the center.
That's right.
And we'll probably just do a little demonstration and show people how they can actually see whether their property is within 800 meters, because there is a tool down the bottom of this website where you be able to measure where you are and how far you're away from that. So if you just use the tool thing down the bottom, measurements, and then start that, and then you can quickly sort of just do the calculation there, and you go here, and I'll say you go here, and then on the edge, that's way out. So it may
to the edge of the shopping center.
So you can actually go straight down because there's
Oh
a path
yeah.
there.
So,
Otherwise, you have to get your Fitbit on.
Yeah.
Or
Go
have
right
reference
and walk
there we go.
yeah.
manually.
Yeah.
So the better way to do it is obviously, as you suggested earlier, get a town, get a surveyor,
Get a surveyor or
and
a
then
town
get
planner
them
to check.
to show you how exactly it's being calculated, and also do the exact measurement. So you go from there to the corner, then go the way down through the park.
Yep, you can go through the park. It's
Okay,
walkable.
I'm going to do a wiggly line and say, so that's about just under 700 meters.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, exactly.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Yeah. So we basically touched how you're able to identify your house within the LMR, and then the basic check about the current planning control and also the major constraint of your house, heritage or bushfire, things like that.
Exactly.
Then we can then talk about
We can move on.
how LMR impact the home value.
Yep.
Obviously,
I'm leaving that to you
it's basically just whether it's worse as a house
Mm.
or worse more as a development side.
Yeah.
So I hand over to Tao to talk about a little bit.
Yeah. So let me bring this back on, because I've had a couple of
Technical issues.
technical issues.
Can I ask one more question while
Yeah.
Tao's sorting that out?
Yeah.
What is the process? So I'm in the LMR,
Right.
okay? I've got the golden ticket.
got the golden ticket.
Congratulations. And like if somebody, what's the planning proposed? Like, what's the planning from there? Do we need to wait for something to be gazetted? Is it a
No.
time frame that we need to wait? When can I go and lodge a DA to realize that?
So the good news is that it's all in place now.
Okay.
It 100% is in place now.
Okay.
This is a state government policy.
So
that
not
has been
like
done.
Todd in some
No, it's
instances
not-
where
it's not a
councils have
Todd.
completely pushed back.
Yeah, no.
Transport orientated development for those. So it's there, it's
It's
here,
there, it's here,
Right.
it's in.
it's legislation.
However,
Yes.
caveat on that is that what would be really good is if there was a pathway to going through a quick process. Unfortunately, every LMR proposal needs to go back through council. Now, having said that, except the good news is that even though the bad news is it has to go through council, And depending on which council, whether you're Lane Cove, Mossman or Sydney Ku-ring-gai, councils are not the easiest people to deal with. I think we can say that quite honestly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there are many people on this webinar going, yep. However, there's a document that gives you what you can and can't do on your site. So whether you're an R2, R3, or an R4 or an R1, you have the ability to do developments like, for example, a dual occupancy, right? Or a townhouse or a medium rise or what we call a manor house, which is 2 above, 2 below.
Okay.
So like 2 apartments above, 2 apartments below. And with those standards, you have to put a DA into council. However, it's non-refusal standards. So non-discretionary non-refusal standards. They must, if you meet all the requirements, they must tick it and give you a DA. They must approve the DA.
Within what time frame?
Now that's over
Sorry,
down the
that's
road.
cheeky.
That was cheeky.
Yeah.
No, Pete's right. Unfortunately, councils can, even though councils have these rules that say that you cannot stop the development going through and you cannot reject the development, they can ask for things that are problematic. Like, for example, if you are in a conservation zone or you're next to, say, a heritage building, they can go, oh, great, we can ask for heritage of the next door, we can ask for heritage impact statement, we can ask for this, we can ask for that, we can ask for that. Now, that's when you get your town planner to yell, scream and kick like I do and say, nope, sorry guys, nope, this is what we need. You know, sorry, non-refusal standards and we'll take it from there. I always say we give councils a little bit of leeway because poor things are under a lot of pressure at the moment.
There's a huge amount.
There's
huge amount in the system. Huge.
There was one council who told me that they had 1,000 DAs on their desk. 1,000 DAs on their desk. Imagine that, right? So trying to get that through that with all the staff that they have. But
It's challenging.
It's challenging.
Absolutely.
So as much as we berate councils, we do also have to give them a little bit of kind of, pat on the back going, it's okay, we're here to help. But at the same time, don't let them kind of push you around a little bit.
So is that fair to say the LMR, obviously from state, they basically give you on the planning, what you said in terms of the more dense the development, right? Townhouse, low rise, mid rise, dual occupancy. So that sort of planning uplift the density applied to your home is non-refusal. So council cannot say no to what you try to apply. However, council will also assess the normal DA in terms of other requirement and everything. But in the main planning control, which is authorized by LMR, it's not going to be an excuse for council to refuse your DA.
Exactly right. That's exactly it. So they cannot refuse it, but they can still delay, right? And they can still find reasons.
But they're still assessing on other criteria.
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
So no CDC pathway.
Unfortunately,
everything must go through council.
Unfortunately, at this stage, not under the LMRs.
Okay.
However, there are policies out there, and Ku-ring-gai is currently looking at their CDC for the dual occupancies and
complying development
controls, right? They so the CDCs are a pathway where you can get it privately certified rather than going through council, and it should take you can get it certified within 10 days to 21 days. Right?
And it's probably also worth mentioning that CDC is, if you have a CDC, then you don't necessarily need a CC construction certificate.
Exactly.
Which is another potentially 6 to 9, even 12 months in some
and
areas, and the cost to do that. So a CDC is probably the easiest and the best.
But it's more for the it's compliant. It's a minor sort of
Yeah, like
Exactly.
duplexes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You can do townhouses, duplexes, and you
Manor.
can do manor houses under them.
Up, down.
Yeah, up, down manor houses.
Yeah.
So they can all be done under private certification. But at the moment, and I'm sorry for the Ku-ring-gai people out there, at the moment you can't do a CDC on a duplex in Ku-ring-gai at this time.
Yep.
Because they are still figuring out what lot size they want for their dual occupancies.
Yep.
However, North Sydney, Mossman and Lanco, from memory,
Willoughby,
and Willoughby,
yeah.
you can do them under CDC.
Yeah.
Now, that's the technical side of it, the planning side of it. We'll jump into I suppose the other part of the question is about
Show me the money.
the money part of it. So really, the three questions that I think we should answer today is will the LMR impact the value of my home if you're on the North Shore? How much of an impact that will be. The second one is what do you do to maximize that particular development value? And a lot of people will then ask, well, how do I actually go about realizing that money? Because a lot of these potential development sites will need someone like a professional, a developer, to come in and do all the DA and do the development. Eventually, it will be something that will be very different to what it is right now. So the first thing, I suppose, the first question, when we're talking about the impact, there are a couple of key concepts that we want to make sure that people do understand. And they are the difference between the development value. When we speak with a lot of homeowners on the North Shore, we tell them the development value. And also there's the home value. So how much basically your house it was as is. And the other thing that we get asked a lot of times is, how does a developer actually value my property? Why a developer will come around and pay $3, $4, $5, even $10 million for it? Or how do they actually calculate the value of my property? And lastly, we want to have a chat about what the impact are between sort of R1, R2, lower density ones, and R3, R4, the higher density end of the spectrum. I suppose the first one I want people to sort of understand is how we sort of break down what is development value and what is home value. Development value is quite straightforward. It's essentially how much building area you can get on a block of land. And that the term for that is gross floor area, or GFA. I'm sure a lot of people would have heard that term a lot. It's essentially your land area times the floor space ratio. In terms of the LMR, if you're zoned R3 or R4, within 400 meters walking distance of a town center or train station, you're getting 2.2 to 1 FSR. So say if you've got 1,000 square meter block, you times that by 2.2 and you get 2,200 square meter of GFA, gross floor area. And every square meter of that will be at a price, and that's how the developer will sort of calculate how much they'd be able to pay for your land. It also, one other thing that's very important for homeowners to understand is that when we're talking about the development value of a property, the existing building structure, the house, the pool, the garage, whatever that's on it, has absolutely no value to the developer, because they will always be knocked down, and they much prefer to start from scratch. A couple of other things that will sort of affect the value in terms of development is planning risks. So whether the site is actually a raw site, so no DAs or no CDCs, or is it approved, which takes away a lot of the risks for the developer. Site constraints, one thing very typical on the North Shore is trees. So if you've got like a massive tree in the middle of your backyard, your developable land is actually constrained by that particular tree. And trust me, if you're in Ku-ring-gai, and for those that are at the webinar today, if you're in Ku-ring-gai and you have problems with trees in your backyard, you're not alone.
And also easement.
easement.
Yeah,
is another
stormwater
one.
is the main-
Stormwater,
is the main-
there's a bunch of constraints.
Yeah.
There's also the delivery cost or the build cost, and also the cost to, I suppose, do other stuff. The resale value of the end product, the apartments in most cases, and also very importantly, the terms of sale. At the end of the day, the development value is a mathematical equation. It's all about what number comes out at the end.
Yeah, it's a calculation basically, and I'll touch it for how briefly explain how developer calculate it.
Yeah,
and the home value will be.
The home value will be very straightforward. It's whatever the land value might be, and also whatever the house that's sitting on that block of land is worth. Now, it also depends on the age of the building conditions, improvements, and also, I suppose,
The street that it's on.
Is the street that's on.
All of those things.
And one thing that a lot of people don't necessarily take into consideration is the scarcity of the land, how rare it might be. And we're looking at an example of a house that sits on 2,000 square meter of land in Gordon. And you don't come across land of that size every day. So there's the fact that it's over 2,000 square meter is of a higher value than two houses that are sitting on 1,000 square meter or quarter acre blocks each. So the scarcity does add additional value to the land. And also, a lot of owners, if you lived in the same house for the last 30 or 40 years, chances are you're very emotionally attached to the property. You do not want to move out of the house, and it will cost the developer a lot more money to incentivize you to sell your property and then move on to the next one. So the real question is, how much does that house actually mean? What does that house actually mean to you, particular as an owner? We had one particular case a couple of years ago when we're dealing with an owner they own a house in Killara, and a lot of developers told us the story that they've tried to approach this particular owner to sell their property over the last sort of 10 years, and she's always turned down any offer, no matter how much the developer is willing to offer. But when we approached her, she said the timing was just right because her kids have graduated from Macquarie Uni, and she's now ready to move out of the house. So the emotional attachment ended when her kids graduated from uni, and now she's ready to move on from that property. And it would be a lot easier to negotiate with owners like that, because it's all about how much more I can get as a development or as part of a development stage.
So for the development value of your land, how developer actually calculate that? It's echo what Carl said before. It's a simple calculation or feasibility study, which we go through every day with our client, because at the end of the day, we are trying to help the owner sell the land to developer. There's a lot of things they take into account, but to break that simple, just four component basically is the end the revenue, which is when developer finish the project, how many apartment or how many end product they can deliver on the land, and how much they can receive as a total revenue out of that project. Then that's a headline number. Then you take out the construction costs, right? And then we know the construction cost has been up 30% since COVID. So that has become a very, very sort of expensive part to deliver the project, all crossing, not just in North Shore. So that's a big part. We need to take out the construction costs. And then we need to take out the developer profit. So obviously developer doing this to making money, but the profit they are chasing is relatively a set amount. They're not going to take on the project with a very little profit because it's just not feasible for them to do it. And the
funders won't lend the money.
Exactly.
The banks and the funders want a certain amount of profit in there, and
before they want give the debt to the developer. And when then the left part is the land value they afford to pay to the landowner.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of small parts saying DA costs, consultant costs, interest on the debt, your sales and marketing costs when developer sell their apartments. But basically, they play a small role. The major three costs we need to consider is the developer's profit, construction costs, which is the absolutely the main one, and then the land, what we call residual land value to the landowner. So to simplify, that's how developer calculate your land value.
Yeah. And one thing that a lot of owners asked us in the last sort of months or two is my house actually worth more as a development site? Am I better off selling my house or my property to a developer and to either turn it into part of an apartment development or maybe a dual occupancy, which is duplex development? And that's one of the reasons we made that slide about development value versus home value. Is the development value is not always higher than the house value or the home value, because if your house is worth say $5 million today, and you're expecting someone to come in and say we'll offer you $10 million, that may or may not happen. And if it's not worth say more than $5 million, $6 million, maybe you don't consider selling it to a developer because it's not actually,
it's not a big enough incentive for you to do.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So it's a case by case basis.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And generally we sort of had a lot of discussion with developers of the last really over the last 12 months since the LMR was first announced, about what they think the changes in land value or development value would be for different type of sites or properties. We've sort of landed that if you're in R2 zone, low density residential, you should have an increase in your land value up to a certain point, which is different for every street. Because you can now do dual occupancies where you previously weren't able to. And if you're within 800 meters or 800 meters walking distance from town centers and train stations, you should theoretically have a higher development potential. Now, is that development potential going to translate into a higher price for your house? Not necessarily. And that's one thing a lot of owners don't quite understand is, if I'm in a better location, if I'm closer to the station, if I'm getting more development potential, why is my property worth less than something that's 100 meters down, but not within 100 meters? Well, the thing all comes back to the calculation.
Yes.
The equation we were talking about early on. Maybe the cost to deliver the project is higher, therefore making the land value, the residual land value, lower than what otherwise would have been possible further down the street. So it's not always, it's a theoretical uplift. It's not always going to be a higher value. But it's just,
But at the end of the day, I guess it's just more what FSI you end up being enjoying on your property, because the high FSI, the more density can be developed on your land. I guess the end of the day is what's the FSR could be applied to your property.
And R1 is similar to R2 in terms of increasing land value, but R1 is actually not that common throughout New South Wales. So we probably wouldn't pay too much attention to that. But if you're in R3 and R4, then I think it's safe to say that you've hit the jackpot. Especially if you're within 400 meters of town centers and train stations, because the increase in density and high limit is actually quite substantial. If you're within 400 to 800 meters, there is an increase, not as much as if you're within 400 meters, but it's still quite a substantial increase. On the counter side, because the availability or the supply of land or developable land is so great. I mean, it's, we're talking about 50 stations in the Todd plan and also 171 stations in town centres in the, the LMR policy. I think there's
a significant increase.
It's a very significant, yeah. So there are a lot of land available for developer to buy or acquire at least in the next 3 to 5 years. It will take a very long time for everything to be sort of delivered. We are expecting the GFA rates, the gross floor area rates,
they could be impacted
to decline a little bit, given the land supply. And one other thing that a lot of people don't actually understand is the commercial term of the sale is, in terms of selling development sites, is just as important as the price.
Yes.
In some cases, even
It's
more so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainty versus. Yeah.
That's right. So it all depends on how much, I suppose, flexibility you can offer in a contract for the developer to acquire your property.
Maybe I give an example of a suburb in Lingfield, which Todd and I has very heavily involved into the market. In last 10 years in Lingfield, there's probably 10 transactions which is actually sold and settled. We sold 7 of them. So we have a lot of knowledge and understanding of the market. We transact about 130 million alone just in Lingfield, one suburb. Traditionally in that suburb, before the state planning and LMR and Todd come to play, we're seeing a site valuable to be purchased to sell to developer, say every 3 to 5 years. There's only one developable site to be available in this suburb. And then Todd, which is being come into play early last year, and then certainly similar to LMR, there's a lot of property now can be developed as a development site. Right before the Todd announced or effective in this location in Lingfield, in 4th station Guy, we right before that, 2 months before we transact the property at a GFA rate of 6,500 per GFA, and also it's in the west side of Pacific Highway, and that is the rate call in the area. And Tom mentioned the term of the transaction. We got 6 months unconditional, which
So
is
6 months settlement.
6 months settlement and it's unconditional exchange. And then when Todd come along, we understand that the deal mainly happened within the Pacific Highway and the Archibald, which is the prime location in Lingfield, and the GFA rate has actually dropped because of the supply, and the settlement term is significantly longer than we have achieved literally 3 or 4 months ago.
So I was supposed to put it into perspective, before Todd, which is very similar to LMR, land were transacting at about $6,500 per square meter of GFA with a relatively short settlement period. After Todd, in Lingfield in particular, land were transacting at about $5,000 to $5,500 per square meter. So almost $1,000 to $1,500 less per square meter, and the deals were done. A lot of them were done on a conditional basis, and also the settlement were about 24 months. So it was 18 months more than what we actually achieved before that.
Can I just jump in here and say this is exactly what I was saying about councils, because councils take so long that a lot of developers will want that extra extended time just so that they can absolutely nail down the DA, the development consent, or the development application, or the development approval, whatever you want to call it.
Because they'll need that for funding as well.
That for funding, exactly. And because councils do take a lot of time, and especially if you've got something like the tubs, which were very kind of untested at the time.
Yeah.
We didn't, a lot of town planners and developers didn't know exactly what they were getting into, and whether or not councils would push back. Some councils did push back, and I'm sure there are some cases that you found that when the sale, like when it got to it, the sale couldn't go through because they couldn't get the development application or the development approval through, and it's a problem, because then the other thing that the developers have to factor in is whether or not they have to go to court. And a court process can take up to 12 months and can cost up to $300,000 to $400,000 if you're really unlucky.
Look, let's probably use a very recent example that we're actually working out right now. It's a development site in Turramurra. The address is 5 to 7 Duff Street. We actually have the year one closing tomorrow.
And it's on market right now.
It's on the market. If you want to find more information, you just have to Google that address, and it will take you to a couple of websites, and they'll have all the information.
So that particular property, as we mentioned before, when you look at how you check your zoning, how you check your within LMR, and are you within 400 meter, are you R3 or R4, that probably actually tick all the box. And they within 400 meter, they are R3. There's no fire protection. There's no tree issue. There hasn't got any issue with the site. So that particular owner do enjoy all the benefit from the LMR. Basically increase the FSR from 0.8 to 2.2.
Yeah, so I suppose it's worth mentioning that it was actually currently approved for 12 houses, but because the uplift in development value is so significant, because under LMR you can now do approximately 55 to 60 apartments, which is way more than 12 houses. The developer, which currently owns the site, actually decided to put everything on hold and just sell the site as is, as a potential townhouse apartment site. And to give you an idea of what the actual increase in land value for this particular site under LMR,
or at least double the value of.
Yeah, before it was the LMR commenced on the 28th of February, say the 27th of February. The site will probably be worth, tens, but at the moment it will probably be double that amount. We'll
probably see the value at around 10 or early tens. And then now at least double. Based on the apartment value.
So we'll see whatever offers we do get tomorrow, and that's going to be very interesting. This is probably one of the first ones on the market in terms of LMR sites, and that's closing tomorrow. One other thing I want to talk about today is how, as individual owners, how you can maximize the development value of your property. There are a couple of factors that's going to affect the development value when we do the calculation. First one is development potential. If you have a smaller site or narrower site, it may affect your development potential because you've got allowed more room for setbacks, and your developable land in the middle will be smaller. So in that case, if you were to increase the size of your site, then it's much more developable, and then you should theoretically have a higher development potential. So a site consolidation will be ideal in that situation. You may be affected by site constraints, as mentioned earlier, by FLOSS, bushfire, flooding, heritage, all that kind of stuff. So, and also with LMR, the one very important factor is the walking distance. And to do that, you may want to consider getting a survey done or getting a planning review done by a town planner to tell you exactly what the constraints are, and you'll be able to make an assessment on, whatever the findings are to then determine the impact on value.
Yeah.
And also the very last thing was we said earlier is the commercial terms of the sale, and the best advice you're going to be able to get is from your solicitors, whereas agents can't be providing any legal advice, but we can make recommendations as to what kind of deal structure would offer the flexibility that a developer needs, and also the time to make sure that they can do whatever they need to do and offer you the best price for that particular sale.
Yeah, that's really the balancing act, right?
That's right.
It's a question of price and terms, and they're the sort of levers that you pull, time and money.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's a
Absolutely.
commercial decision to make in terms of when and if you decide to sell. Risk versus reward. And
that's right.
Yeah.
No, it's very simple for developer. It's how much risk am I exposed to in terms of doing a development.
Yeah.
If the landowner is helping me with reducing some of that risk, I mean, you can't reduce everything.
No.
But wherever you can, if you can help me reduce some of that risk, I'll be able to offer you a little bit more for reducing that risk.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the lower the risk for the developer, the higher the value.
The only thing I would say to that is those sorts of commercial terms can also be offset by the sales process.
That's right.
And an agent or agents running a competitive process, because commercial terms, when something's off market is one element, but when somebody's worried about missing out on something, they can find ways of tightening timeframes, paying more, dependent obviously on the property.
That's right.
That's
the best way for owners to get the best deal is to have competition.
Yes.
When you have
keeps people honest.
That's right. If you
keeps everyone honest.
If you've got two developers fighting
Supply
for the
and
same, fighting for the same site, then one of them will offer a better set of terms to get ahead of the other. May not be the best, the highest price.
Yes.
We always say to owners that the best offer is not always the highest price. It's a combination of the best price and the best terms.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other things I want to add on is how to touch on it before is honestly the site consolidation. Because of we've been in the market to doing this over 10 years and helping so many landowner doing the amalgamation to sell to developer, we were able to identify what's the right size to amalgamate and what the action owner need to be taking to work with the neighbor and what sort of land size or how many amalgamation will be the ideal. It's also a balance act. The larger is not always the better. But sometimes you can't just go and sell your property alone as a development side. So we need to work together.
And that also comes back into planning as well, because especially if you're in somewhere like Ku-ring-gai have a minimum width that you need. I think it's 21 meters from memory now, or they're starting to bring that in. And a lot of block sizes, standard block sizes, are 15 to 18 meters. So you do need that extra person just for the width, which is a real pain. But
but also not too many.
But not too many, because exponentially, the more people you have exponentially, the harder it is.
The less chance you'll get a deal done as well.
So this page is really for owners that are keen to do something in the near future, and we've sort of broke it down to two sections. If you're in an R2 zone, and your chances are you're going to be either trying to do a dual occupancy, or your property is permissible under LMR for dual occupancy development. And what you probably should do, the first thing is jump on those websites we showed you earlier, the LMR viewer and the spectrum viewer, to work out exactly the controls that are applicable to your land. If you want to understand the value of your property or development site, feel free to give us a call. we can sort of run some numbers for you fairly quickly. And once you understand how much it might be worth as a development site and how much your home is worth to you, you can then decide, is it worth pursuing that particular development value? If you think, yes, I do want to do something and I want to divest, I want to sell my property as a development site. As I said, we've done many transactions of development sites on the North Shore. There's definitely something we can do for you to maximise the value on that. And if you want to start your own development, make sure you contact a town planner or an architect. Floss here have done many years in CDCs on the North Shore, so she's very capable of helping any of you that wants to do something. If you are in the R3 or R4 zone, as we said earlier, there's a very good chance that you probably need to amalgamate with your neighbours. So I would start by, again, researching your property on those websites we've mentioned. Feel free to give us a call. We can give you a rough idea of what it might be worth, and you can decide whether it's actually worth your time to pursue that. If you think it is worth doing, have a chat with your neighbours. Chances are they are thinking about exactly the same thing as you are.
If you haven't already met.
If you haven't, knock on the door, just
Can I borrow some sugar and
exactly.
sell our properties together?
We've all done, and have a chat with them about coming together and selling as a collective. We've, as Peter mentioned earlier, we've helped over 400 owners with collective sales. So,
but I think, sorry, just to jump in, as a result of having helped so many owners, we've also seen a lot of owners groups fall apart. And so I think it's really important that the people who you're talking to understand the process and also where the potential pitfalls are, because I think the more people we bring into a decision-making process, the more people have varying motivations, price expectations. They're at all different times of their life. Somebody's got a nicer kitchen than the person next door. They've got a pool, they've got a tennis court. Things can fall apart very quickly. And so I think it is really important. Also legally, I mean, and we won't go into that now. But it's a really there's some really important key decisions. Tonight wasn't designed to do that. It was really I guess, an initial introduction discussion, perhaps talk about some of the things that people are asking us all the time. But there's certainly things that you need to be really aware of before going down these.
There's more technical things we can advise.
Absolutely.
But if we do find in the past and there is the opportunity we identify and the owner agree on board, we should do something, then we go into the detail what things you need to do to ensure a successful sale, which we have advising
and maximize the outcome.
And look, from our experience, you're not going to be able to nail everything in one go or work in a week. It could take a couple of months. Could if everyone's aligned, there's only maybe 3 or 4 owners, you might be able to iron everything out in 3 weeks. But there's a process that everyone can sort of follow with collective sales. And look, we've done this many times, and we'll be able to.
The most we have done is 40 only in one line.
We've done 40 owners in one line. And that was a nightmare.
That took us 18 months to achieve.
Exponential.
Imagine getting 40 people in a room.
If you have that sort of group number, then we go into another discussion of how you manage.
Yes. So we'll be able to share some lights on how you can organize the group, how you can, what sort of documents you need to get to sort of
bind you all together.
That's right. And also what you need to do as an owners group in terms of appointing a solicitor, taking your side to the market if that's what you choose to do. And
this is our time we can answer some questions if anyone.
So we will probably jump into some questions, and I can already see some questions in the Q&A section of that. So I've got a question here from John. Should it be market value rather than home value? I suppose you're asking about the this particular slide, which is this one here, the development value versus home value. Now, when we're putting this slide together, we actually had a thought about whether we should put market value, home value, or house value. We've decided to go with home value because from our experience, a lot of owners are emotionally attached and that's their home. So, you know, we would say that, you know, the home value could be higher than the market value of a particular property because, you know, someone may come around and say, well, I'll pay you $4 million for a house, but you might be like, well,
It'd take me 6 to move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not about how much it's worth. If it is your home, you know, if it's an investment property, then that's a different story. But if it is your home, how much would it cost for you to move on from that? So I think to answer your question, home value will probably be a more appropriate term here. We have another question.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much for the question. Another question. Does the proposed use need to be permissible under the LEP?
Right, that's mine. So under the LMR, no. So the LMR, being a state policy, actually overrides the LEP and DCP. So for those who don't know what those are, so an LEP is a local environmental planning policy. That is the rules that are set down by the state government for each council. So for example, North Sydney Council has a set of rules that say you can do dual occupancies under R2s and this is how much land size you need. Then you go, and that's state government signed off on. State government has to say yes to those council rules and then that's fine. The DCP is what's known as a development control plan, which is, we say in the industry, guidelines. So that sounds like a harsh term, but it is. So a DCP is not actually law, whereas the LEP is. However, ignoring all of that, the LMR has overwritten that because this is a state policy, a SEP or a state planning.
State environmental planning policy.
Thank you.
It's a real mouthful.
A state environmental planning policy.
Should have some more acronyms.
Oh, tell me about it. Oh, trust me, we haven't even started on the acronyms.
OMG.
I know, right? Anyway, so the SEP policy overwrites the LEPs and the DCPs. So to answer the basic question, the LEP under an LMR is not, you don't have to look at the LEP or the DCPs anymore under the LMR policies. However, there are some state policies, like, for example, the duplex code, we'll call it duplex code, or the dual occupancy code, where you have to refer back to the LEP to then proceed to having a CDC or a approval through your local council. So it is very complicated depending on which policy you're using. So some policies, yes, you have to go back to the LEP. The LMRs, no, you don't. It is completely a new document and it has overridden the local environmental planning policies and the DCPs.
Thank you.
Right.
I hope that helped a little bit.
Another question. I suppose that's more to do with the dual occupancy. The FSR is 0.65 to 1. Now the question is, if I do a CDC, say it's permissible, and I do a CDC, would I be able to get 0.65, or would I be? I think there's a different calculation under the CDC.
There is. There's a different calculation depending on what your lot size is. So this is where the state policies are a little bit they go upwards. They're kind of like step upwards. So in most cases, your floor space ratio, GFA, is calculated at 300 square meters plus 25% of, no, other way around, 25% of the land area plus 300 square meters of building. right? Which basically means that it's 300 square meters of building for your dual occupancy, and then 25% of your land value, which I'm not good at calculations at this time of night, but yeah, so you get a reasonably big one. However, if you go down the scale, and depending on where you are and what zoning you are, so for example, there are some zonings which are R1, which have a lower lot size, minimum lot size for dual occupancies, then you go down to a GFA of say 55%, 45%, or 60%. So it will depend on your local council and also the DCP, so the set policy determining the duplex amount that you're allowed to build.
Yeah.
I didn't explain that very well.
Yeah, that's okay. If the property is on the corner, and the land area is slightly under the minimum lot size, say 450 square meters, is it still possible to redevelop?
It depends. It depends what you want to do for a start. Under CDC, absolutely not. So under complying development, the rules that are set are those rules, are black and white. You cannot, there is no such thing as merit under a complying development control. If, however, it is council and the LEP under the council LEP, then that opens up a whole rainbow of possibilities. So if, for example, you have a site that is slightly under, say that you've got a site in, let's pick a suburb, let's say Blacktown, for example. I know no one here is from Blacktown, but let's say it is. Under the current Blacktown code, you're allowed to do a dual occupancy on 650 square meters on a corner block. If you have a corner block that is 600 square meters, you can ask for permission to have what's called a variation to the LEP.
Gotcha.
So you're allowed to vary the LEP, but it's under what's called a 4.6 variation. And you're allowed a certain percentage of variation before they say, no, we're not going to allow it. Like you can't ask for 100% variation and expect.
Slightly.
So like we always say the threshold is about 10%. You can go over that threshold, not a problem, but expect more of a fight.
The chance of you get refusal is going to be
so when when you go over 10% variation on anything, whether it be your minimum lot size, whether it be your floor space, height, anything like that, they will automatically send it to what's called the planning panel of each council, and the planning panel is a panel of say 5 or 6 people, including lawyers, planners, a community representative, no councillors, thankfully, but community representatives and architects, and they will decide whether or not your application has merit to be approved.
Sure.
All right. Then you take it to court.
So basically, if we attach the rule, CDC is absolutely black and white. If you want to challenge, if you think your property is special and you think you have merit to challenge, we need to go to DA. And obviously DA is costly,
and time
consuming. And then, best to consult with the architect or town planner, whether it's worth the fight, basically.
Exactly.
Right. One more question, I suppose. This is something that actually was asked by a client of mine a couple of days ago, and I just wanted to see if Pete can share some of your thoughts on this. So this property is in Turramurra, zone R4, within 400 meters of the train station. So they're going to benefit the most from the LMR. Now they've got a situation where they're more than willing to sell, but the next door neighbor is in their 80s and don't necessarily want to move from their home. Would a developer still be interested to buy my client's property? And if so, would there be a discount?
I feel like I'm a little bit put on the spot. Look, This all comes back to what we were saying before in relation to risk, right?
Yep.
So if I can only purchase half of the site that I need to make a development site, I need to do two things. One is I need to pay less to take into consideration the risk of how long I might have to hold it for, that I may never acquire the property next door because he might leave it to his children.
That's right.
The other alternate, well, sorry, there's probably a few more. The other alternative is your client selling by way of option. So he gives the developer the right to buy that property, and then, you know, the developer tries to work on the property next door and either gets it or doesn't, but, you know, isn't forced to outlay huge amounts of money to buy this property if he can't get the next door neighbor. And then probably the third option is like a long delayed settlement for the gentleman or the person rather. I'm not sure whether they're a man or woman, doesn't matter. They, what their goals are, I guess. I mean, is it I will absolutely never leave, you know, no way, no how, no nothing, or is it a price thing? Because typically, you know, price fixes everything. You know, bad feng shui, I've heard, can be fixed if the price is right. No, I joke, but you know, sometimes that occurs. But then also there's those times where you look and you can see the whole suburb's being developed apart from a 5-acre parcel. You know, and these people have got their beautiful home on it, being offered $50 million, don't want to sell. So I think it's a risk appetite thing. There are ways of doing it, but I certainly, if I was buying something, I know what I would do. I think you have to protect yourself, because if I go and pay full price for it and then I can't get next door, it's not a very wise business decision.
And I think it's worth to say that it's worth to mention that if you're the owner of the property, the future of your property is absolutely up to owning. Like, no one can make that decision for you.
That's right, but we all, and this is where it can get really interesting, when we rely on our neighbours to increase our own, to benefit ourselves. You know, there's a community type approach here, which anyway, I'll leave it all to your imagination about what happens when you know, neighbours become good friends.
And one other question that was sort of touched on.
The neighbours reference, by the way, if you're not too old for that.
Just so you know, that my mother was actually the original neighbour of the neighbours. Just that.
We'll be selling Ramsey Street next week. Rezoning Ramsey Street.
One question we sort of touched on a little bit earlier is, you know, very similar to this one we've got here. And I promise we've gone overboard, and we'll be the last question here. You know, this particular owner is part of an owners group, and they asked the question whether they should include more properties. And if the site is larger and bigger, would the developer be able to pay more, as they can say, you know, go challenge the council? So partially that's probably your specialties, and you know, to get more over whatever is allowed on the LMR. I guess I'll let Jenny answer the first part. Which is, should they go bigger?
We touched that before. Generally speaking, we need to have a certain size of the land to deliver a decent project. If the property is too small, it's sometimes unviable to do a development. However, if you go too big, you potentially limit your buyers pool from the market. There's only certain player in city market who are able to take on very big project. You know, we would probably have 10 people to negotiate with. But if you potentially design your land size into ideal size, which we can
more bite size.
There's more developer were able to take on such project. Potentially, there's more competition for you, and hence better price and better terms for you.
And I think it's probably to put things into perspective. You know, if you're in Mossman and you've got a project that's about 100 units, that's a really big project.
It's a very big project. It's huge.
Exactly. So if you're in Kooringa, you've got a project that's about 150 units, that's massive. That's massive, and chances are you're not going to be able to, consolidate a site to accommodate that much mass. But anything that's between the size of say 50 units on in Coringa or 20 units in Mossman, that's a very decent size. You don't necessarily need to go bigger.
Yeah, agree.
And I suppose the second part is, can they go over whatever's being,
So this is actually a very interesting question, and it actually has happened before in many development sites around Sydney, where there is actually a special policy that says if you want extra height or extra floor space, you can get it. However, the level must be affordable. The whole level must be affordable housing. So a lot of people kind of balk at the idea of affordable housing. So affordable housing is not social housing. There is a difference. So it's not government owned, it's not government controlled. It is mainly, the purpose of it is mainly for
Key workers.
such as ambulance, police,
Teachers.
doctors, teachers, nurses, all of the critical people that we need to have our society.
So essential service, they couldn't afford to buy or rent in the area,
Exactly.
but they couldn't afford to live away from this area because the employment is in this location.
So, like for example, a nurse, for example, who's on, almost very, very low wages compared to many other people. If they're working at Royal North Shore, and they're living, say, out at Parramatta or Blacktown, it's going to take them 2 hours to get to work. Whereas if you have affordable housing, it means that they can live close to Royal North Shore and they can get there to treat you. Right. The other thing about affordable housing is that affordable housing is 20% below market value. And for investors, and I know I'm stepping on a few toes here, but for investors, it's actually a really good thing because you do have to hold it for 10 to 20 years, depending on the rules that you're of the day. It's really good for investors because you get a steady income. You get that steady income because those people are not going to trash it. They're not going to create problems. There's always going to be someone to take up that spot. So you're always going to have a steady income. And at the end of 20 years, it reverts back to a normal apartment, which you can then sell on.
So I suppose the answer is there are ways or avenues
ways
that
of
can
doing
challenge that, but it comes at
But you also have to have meet certain criteria.
Is it worth it to do that? Because it's not an easy process,
The other thing is that it depends on the market you're going to go into as well. So there are some people who, for whatever reason, don't like the idea of mixing affordable and normal apartments, right?
Market.
Because they see that there's a kind of a pitfall that it's the people are renting at 20% below market value, and they think that could detriment their property, when in actual fact it doesn't. It's perfectly fine. So
okay, well that sort of concludes the webinar today. We thank everyone for your time. Everyone here as well. Everyone attending the webinar online.
Thank you.
thank you.
Will be if you want a copy of the recording or the slides, feel free to email us. We'll be more than happy to send that.
And again, if you're not comfortable to ask any question in the public forum, and our contact detail is set back on the registration. Feel free to reach out our team and Frost team, and more than happy to help.
If you want to know a little bit more about, I suppose, the value of your property, we can assess it at another time, and then give you an idea how much it might be worth from a development site perspective, and also if you need to potentially consider doing a duplex development or dual occupancy development yourself.
Absolutely.
Feel free to get in touch with Floss.
My favorite.
Okay, well, thank everyone again for your time, and we wish you a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.